ears are very important to us. Please hold on, and our program will begin shortly. The Soundcheck Podcast is coming up. Please continue to hold. Keep up with the Soundcheck Podcast and everything that's happening in the New Sounds empire. Just go to newsounds.org and follow us on social media. All of the icons are in the top right corner of the page. All of our other musicians are currently playing for other customers. Please stay with us, and someone will play for you in just a moment. From newsounds.org and the studios of WNYC in New York, it's time for another live performance in our Soundcheck Podcast series. Streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, I'm John Schaefer. Since 2011, the sax player, vocalist, and composer Matana Roberts has embarked on a musical journey through jazz, storytelling, history, and traditional music. It tells the story of America through her own family, a lineage that she can trace back over 250 years. She's just released the fourth album in this Coin project, as she calls it, and Matana Roberts today has brought a quartet into the studio to play three excerpts, and I'll say right off the bat that each of the three has a very different sound. This first one is called Piddling. That is Matana Roberts and her quartet live here in the studio with an excerpt from the Coin Project. Chapter 4 is subtitled Memphis. Some version of that piece, Matana, is on the record. Let me introduce the rest of first of all, Matana playing saxophone, doing some vocals. It's great to have you back with us here in the studio. Thanks for having me. It's a
pleasure to be in the studio.
And so going around the room, we have Matt Lavelle on trumpet, pocket trumpet, and alto clarinet. Hannah Marcus has picked up the accordion, but in that piece she was mistreating a violin with, at one point, a wire whisk, right?
Yes.
Like an egg beater. And Ryan Sawyer behind our drum kit. You'll hear him on the jaw harp later on in the set as well. So, Matana, it's always hard, even though you've been here a couple of times, always hard for me to kind of encapsulate for people what the Coin Project is. I mean, it's family history, but it's America kind of writ small, right? I mean, your family becomes the storyline for a bigger idea.
I'm really into archive, and so I'm using access that I have to an old archive as kind of like a cornerstone of digging into areas of American history that I also find fascinating. But I need narrative to explore some of that. And I just found that some of the family stories that I unearthed matched very well these certain segments I wanted to dig in more. And it gave me a bit more comfort in terms of digging into it in that way. But I'm really just trying to use the more kind of autobiographical stuff as just a jump off.
Right.
Into and I have a lot to dig through.
Because as you've told us once before, you can trace your family back to 1750.
1750, yeah. I have a baptismal record. And I have a lot of people to thank for a lot of that research. People that I've come across over the years who are already doing some of the research that allowed me to have so much already to dig into. Mm-hmm. And now with the advent of DNA tests that, these public tests that people can get, and you're linked to so many different people through that who can also give you information. And it's interesting, the history of slavery. I mean, slaves were a product. And so they were heavily documented because it was a product in a sense.
Right.
And I just happened to come from a family lineage that also had some small success in being landowners and business people of their own at a time where that was unusual. Mm-hmm. But because of that, there are records. So that's why a lot of the information that I do have. But I also come from a family that sat around at dinner and just talked about a lot of these stories. Mm.
So who's the woman? I mean, if we look at the cover of Coin 4, subtitled Memphis, who's the woman on the cover?
That's my grandmother. That's my maternal grandmother. I love that photo so much. The first time I saw it, I said, that is going to be an album cover. But I didn't even have the Coin series in mind at that time.
Yeah.
She was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, spent the majority of her adult life in Chicago, but a lot of her political ethos, her family was heavily involved, community, grassroots, all sorts sorts of things within Memphis.
Well, but this is clearly an arrest photo. So
right.
Grandma was a badass, too.
That's right. She would like that so much. Yeah, she was. So that's a mugshot photo from 1940 Chicago. And I like the irony of that photo, looking at the arrest photo of my grandmother and knowing that she lived after that beyond and went on to have a very rich life. I just recently did a piece in honor of Sandra Bland that Matt also played on as well. You know, Sandy didn't live. So I think a lot about that in terms of this cross-reference. And I think we're living in a time where we need to be reminded of how hard people fought for certain tenets of history, because we're going backwards. And I wanted to use that photo and memory of Memphis as a push to remind.
Now, earlier parts of the Coin, what would you call a 4-part trilogy, a quadrilogy? It's going to be a 12-part thing when it's all done,
I did that to myself. Yeah. I did that to myself, but I'm committed. Okay. I am committed. I'm going to finish.
But early on, we were in Louisiana.
We were.
And then in Mississippi.
Yep.
So now Memphis.
Yep.
And you know, the thing with the term coin, I mean, it's the name of a woman, right, who set up this community for free people of color.
Yes, it was her nickname. Marie Metoyer. My grandfather was raised in that community. I am related to Marie Metoyer by marriage. I'm not so sure by blood. It's possible.
Yeah.
But she was the first strong female archetype that I was exposed to as a child. My grandfather used to call me Coin, which I always loved that. And my grandmother, who's on the cover there, and she's also on the cover of Chapter 2. It's a photo of her as a child playing trombone in her junior high school band.
Yeah. And in putting weaving all of this stuff together, family history, stories that have come down to you through generations, the wider American picture, you borrow folk music and other forms of traditional music, you're tapping into free jazz and spiritual jazz. How do you hold all of that together? What's the compositional process like? Well,
it starts a lot with the archive and thinking about data and data sets and how, you know, everything can kind of be boiled down to numbers and to groupings. And musical language, Western notation is also very similar. But I've also moved into working with abstract shapes and graphic notation and things of that nature. To me, the compositions really represent like what it means, what I feel it means to be American. It's a pastiche of so many different ideas and cultures blending into one. And I really see the American experience as a living, breathing quilt. And so in the compositions, I'm trying to recreate that somehow and also let the compositions sit as art objects.
And how repeatable an experience is any one part of the Coin project?
Most of them are pretty repeatable. This one in particular, though, is a bit more conceptual, I feel. This will probably be the last more conceptual. I feel like I've pushed the limits of where I would like to go with that. And that's been good. And it's because I've been able to play this music with such kind and talented musicians who have allowed me to push them. But now I'm kind of ready to pull back a little bit and go back into a different kind of zone of sound reality within the work so that the repeatability is clear. Yeah.
So, talking about that, you will be doing a kind of a record release show on Sunday at Roulette in Brooklyn to mark the release of Coin Chapter 4, subtitled Memphis. But tomorrow night, you're doing duets with trumpeter Dave Douglas at Happy Lucky No. 1 in Brooklyn.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm amazed that Coin has left you time to do anything else.
I'm really trying hard to... You know, the Coin is so encompassing with the research and I'm constantly doing research and working on the work and visiting different places and just trying to pull it all together. But I put that project together also because I wanted to challenge myself as a composer. I wanted to see how far can I extend this language. But I still like kind of going back into home space of playing a particular kind of familiarity, and playing with Dave is brings me back to the roots of where I've come from.
Yeah. Matana Roberts and her quartet are here with us in the studio. And so this piece you're going to play next is ostensibly some form of Trail of the Smiling Sphinx. But it seems like you're able to kind of draw from other elements of the story at will almost.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in the studio and give an impression.
Yeah.
You know? Right. But the full exclamation will be on Sunday.
All right. Well, the experience of hearing the quartet live in the studio is something I'm very much looking forward to. We get a little bit of the actual storytelling in this, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a taste of that.
Matana Roberts with Trail of the Smiling Sphinx.
Child of the wind, even Daddy said so. We used to race and I would always win, and he'd say, run baby, run like the wind. That's it, the wind. Memory is the most unusual thing. Tuesday. Life goes on like the mighty waters on its way to the Gulf, sometimes calm, sometimes dashing. Waves high, peaceful still. He calmed the sea once with just a few words. I remember Daddy staying behind to talk with Reverend Fleetwood. It didn't appear pleasant from a distance, but Daddy was always talking sharp to somebody. Not in some mean way, just, in that way that he was letting them know that he was really listening. In that old soldier way of his, he was so scarred by that war, haunted by ghosts in the far-off corners of his mind, that I could never quite decipher. I am a child of the wind, even Daddy said so. We used to race and I would always win, and he'd say, run baby, run, run like the wind, that's it, the wind. Memory is the most unusual thing. Wednesday, her eyes would light up and lips curl when she told me of the heaven where black folks could enter any of the 12 pearly gates. And they walked on streets of gold and they all had shoes. She could tell stories with such humor and grace, and she would often sing to me. I got shoes and they got shoes, everybody's got shoes. When I get to heaven, gonna put on the shoes, gonna walk all over that heaven, heaven. And the shades of night close in, the day passes on to the great beyond. I find myself at the end of another. I haven't been too busy, I'm just going along. My last glimpse was seeing her candy-colored skin lit up by that bright, hot light. She was on her knees, head down, in a prayer that seemed was not being heard. Daddy in a stance, ready to defend what he felt was his right to be. The house of God, they said, was no place for the mixing of races. Some of those voices I could make out. Mr. Hancock of the dried goods store, Mr. Hart of the livery stable, and even Daddy's cousin, Tom C. McCall, whose voice I could always recognize because it always seemed pitched to the lowest of the low, and he still had that accent that spoke of a far, far, far away place that he couldn't hide, even if he wanted to. I am a child of the wind, even Daddy said so. We used to race, and I would always win, and he'd say, run, baby, run, run like the wind, that's it, the wind. Memory is the most unusual thing. I am a child of the wind, even Daddy said so. We used to race, and I would always win. And he'd say, run, baby, run, run like the wind, that's it, the wind. Memory is the most unusual thing. Do Lord, oh do Lord, do you remember me? Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do you remember me? Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do you remember me? Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do you remember me?
Well, that is Matana Roberts and the quartet live in the studio, and some music from the latest installment in her Coin project. Coin Chapter 4, Memphis is the name of the album. We heard some of Trail of the Smiling Sphinx, although Matana, that ended up weaving in lots of elements from throughout this record.
Yes.
The borrowed material, Little Light of Mine, Tennessee Waltz, there's throughout the record there's a sea shanty, which you guys will be doing for us in a bit.
Yeah.
what's the significance of those choices, of those decisions on what to borrow and how to use them?
Well, I mean, I go towards what historically seems interesting. To me, Tennessee Waltz for me was a really obvious pick. I wanted to mess around with that a little bit.
Because of the Memphis connection?
Yeah, and it's a bit of a precarious thing because I'm not from Tennessee. I'm not from Memphis. This is my impression of these places as an outsider. So I'm also still trying to have some respect for these places in a different kind of way. And so pulling on this folk material allows me to do that.
Yeah. And then there's also the question of the way you deploy your voice. Sometimes it's in actual songs, sometimes it's in speech, sometimes it's in that gray area in between, sometimes it's like full-throated cries. The kind of recurring thematic material in this album is the girl saying, Daddy said run, I run, we used to race, I always win, run baby run, run like the wind. That recurs throughout the record, but at some point sort of later in the record, you get this other story where it's really important that the girl be able to run like the wind.
Right.
And whose story is that?
Well, so that's when things move into kind of like a fevered dream exploration of my own imagination. Because the story is such a painful story, and I remember when I was told the story, and I remember when I decided that it was going to be in the series, and trying to think, well, how am I going to tell this story without being traumatized? Without being traumatized by speaking it.
Yeah.
And I need to think of details. So I actually don't know what her relationship with her father was like, but I know what my relationship with my father was like as a small child. And so that was a time period where I felt incredibly safe. And so I tried to channel into that, plug into that. Mm-hmm. And the phrase, how I speak that phrase is actually, every time I hear it, I can hear my father's voice when I say it. And I was just trying to figure out how to make the trauma of this child witnessing this violence, make it a bit more fun, of having to be abandoned, basically, which is what happened to her.
Her being, is this your grandmother?
Right. I go back and forth about if I was ever going to identify her because this story is such a painful one. But yes, she is a woman that I'm related to, and is related to that woman as well.
So without going into a lot of detail, because you don't, but we do, she hears rough voices, she smells burning smoke.
Yeah.
And she runs.
I know that her mother told her to run.
Right.
And I know that her father was murdered. And I know that her mother was beaten. And I know that her mother died in an asylum, in terms of how the story was told to me. And I know that she was in those woods for maybe 4. The story always changed. It was like 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. But at least 4 months or so. And the wooded area of this town, which wasn't Memphis, but it was Tennessee, seemed to be the division between like the nicer side of town and the not so nice side of town. And of course, the not so nice side of town is where black folks were living. And they put out food for her when word got around that there was this child. And eventually she was taken in by a very loving black family. And she went on to live a very, very beautiful life. But she had a very specific, I can say this because I know it to be true, she had a very specific hatred for white people because of what had happened to her parents, and some other things that I know she experienced.
Yeah. So, again, mining your own family history brings up, all of these kind of bigger ideas and ideals about America and what it means. It's I guess, no surprise that you thought you had to make a 12-part series out of this. But
yeah.
Sorry to keep reminding you of that, Matana, but you
owe
us 8 more now.
I know, I did that. And I had to do that because when I boiled down all of the stories that I wanted to deal with, I counted out 10. And I thought, here's an amazing way to challenge myself as a composer, because each record will be a different ensemble configuration and just sonic exploration. And then I realized after the 10 that I forgot, I love doing solo recordings. So I made there are two bookends of the series, and it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've already got a map of where this journey is going to take you.
You know, and I might someone told me, you should just mess with people's heads and then next time release chapter 9. People will be like, what? But no, they've all been mapped out for a long time, and I work on them constantly.
Well, I have found each one to be very much its own thing, and yet sort of full of echoes of the things that have come before. I assume that's intentional on your part.
Yeah, I'm trying to I'm trying to formalize my own compositional language, and I'm trying to utilize that same language throughout all of them. Though I am finally learning what's not working, and that's a good place to be. And I finally realized there's some techniques within the compositional language I'm going to retire because they just don't work. But I needed to try it. I needed to be around wonderful people like this, for instance, who allow me room to try.
Well, and once again, those wonderful people, Matt Lavelle on trumpets and alto clarinet, Hannah Marcus on violin and accordion, Ryan Sawyer was playing the jaw harp and our drum kit, and of course, you, Matana, singing, playing the saxophone. The next piece is a dramatic change in texture on the record, because the texture just clears out and it's just voices. And it's this old kind of sea shanty, which people will know, if they know sea shanties, under a couple of different names. I know it as a drop of Nelson's blood.
A drop of Nelson's blood.
But you refer to it as Roll Yield Chariot,
because I traced it to an old Negro spiritual that whoever pulled up a drop of Nelson's blood documented that they pulled it from that also, which I thought was really interesting. And the series is very much about migration and movement. I was telling you earlier that I did that cargo ship trip this year.
Yeah, so you took a cargo ship from Liverpool to Halifax.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That must have been, they say, a trip.
Yeah, I mean, it was a trip, and I have lots of documentation from it, and I plan to intersperse it into this project. But what stuck out to me was, one, how sunsets and sunrises are never the same. They're always different every day. And this idea that I am descended from this human cargo that at some point had to be brought up to deck and would see this beauty while also having to internalize a certain kind of terror. And also, even thinking about explorers at sea and how, they didn't have GPS and they didn't have, these different things that they used, and looking out on the horizon and seeing nothing but water for days filled me with joy and trepidation.
Yeah.
And wow. I love sea shanties for that reason, and that's why it's on this record.
All right, so on the album, it's called Her Mighty Waters Run. It is essentially an arrangement of this tune.
Yeah, all the titles on the record, it's one long poem. And I never tell people that, but that's what it is. And on each record, there's a clue in each record as to the next record. I should just say that. I never say that. But there's a clue in this record about where we're going next.
Okay. I would have guessed Chicago, but I guess we'll just have to wait for Chapter 5
No,
to see.
I can say I'm done with locations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're done. We're done with the rooting of those locations.
All right. Let's hear this live performance from Matana Roberts and the quartet.
Okay. the time that it lasts. Well, life goes on as the time for it lasts, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along, roll the old chariot along, roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. If your mama wants to go, she shall wear a starry crown. If your papa wants to go, he shall wear a starry crown. If your mama wants to go, she shall wear a starry crown, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. It's so bad to feel discouraged. Let our love grace our hearts. Yes, so bad to feel discouraged. Let our love grace our heart. It's so bad to feel discouraged. Let our love break our heart, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Oh, we'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. Yes, we'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. Yes, we'd be all right if the wind was in our sails, and we'd all hang on behind, and we'd roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. We'll roll the old chariot along. Roll the old chariot. Roll
the little hairs on the back of my neck are standing up.
Mine too.
Oh, man. Matana, there is a power in some of these old songs. And I guess you feel it when you're singing them.
Yeah, I like this idea of people just singing to sing, singing to get through hard things, singing to just move through time, where it's not about, because I'm not a trained singer, and I've always had kind of a love-hate. I just want to play alto. So I'm just making vehicles that I can play more alto. But there's something about the link between the voice and the vocality of the alto that links together in a way that I really love.
Also, the breath control,
Yeah, the breath control. And I'm a little sick and breathy, so thank you for putting up with that.
No, it sounded amazing.
But it's so fun to sing together, and it's amazing what it does for your spirit during sad times, and to know that a song like this was sung when people needed lift. So I think about that a lot.
Well, and then, of course, it did become a work song, so it actually helped people get things done as a sea shanty. It appears on the most recent album by Matana Roberts. Coin Chapter 4, Memphis, is being celebrated this Sunday at Roulette with a full ensemble performance. Matana's doing duets with Dave Douglas at Happy Lucky No. 1 in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, tomorrow night. We've been really fortunate to have the quartet performing for us. Your third time now on the show,
I
Matana.
know.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
me back. Please let me come back.
Absolutely. Chapter 5.
Chapter 5.
Matana Roberts, my guest. This is Soundcheck.